And welcome to the Mutant Blitz Podcast. I am Josh Hennig, your host. This is episode 1, the inaugural episode. So what we're going to be doing each week is this is going to be a place where, for those people who know me, there's two things that I always talk about and people always ask me about. It's sports and it's comic books. This is the place where you can get all of that unfiltered, uncensored information about both topics. Each and every week, we're going to open with a 6-pack of topics. Then we're going to have our one-on-one conversation each week. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of an epilogue, a bit of a specific topic I want to end each week with. And of course, you're listening here on my YouTube channel, so please hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, support the podcast, and let's get started. Hear that? We're opening the first of our 6-pack of topics. So let's start with this. Ever since the weekend, I've heard about LeBron James. And I do spend a lot of time having to defend LeBron James on the radio because this is a guy who people just want to find fault with him. The things he does do wrong, hey, you know what? No one blames him for those things. No, we're going to almost make up stuff. And by the way, for all the people who keep comparing LeBron to Michael Jordan, stop it. He's nothing like Jordan. Jordan's nothing like him. You want to compare him to Magic? You want to compare him to Jerry West? That's fine. And that's funny because that's part of the topic here. Because everyone has a theory where LeBron is going to go or where he's not going to go and why. Nobody really knows where LeBron's going. I don't even think LeBron knows where LeBron is going yet. You heard me mention Magic Johnson and Jerry West. Jerry West runs the Clippers, has a long relationship with LeBron. LeBron calls him the Godfather. Who did LeBron to dap up and talk to twice at the All-Star game? It was Jerry West. LeBron's got a home in LA. Why not the Clippers? Well, I've heard the explanation every time. Well, it's because of Magic, and it's because of the Lakers. He could go to the Lakers. But there's an assumption that he's going to be a free agent, though, in this offseason. LeBron could opt into his contract that final year and stay in Cleveland for 2018-19. What if he pushes off free agency for one more year? What if he waits for Klay Thompson to hit free agency? What if he waits for Boogie Cousins to be fully recovered from that Achilles injury and say, Boogie, why don't you go sign a 1-year deal with New Orleans, get healthy, we'll hit free agency together? I don't think that's far-fetched at all. Dwayne Wade's back in Miami. LeBron James made that post on Instagram saying, I missed this place, all the great memories, showing off the Miami arena. He goes to Miami a lot. Why not go back to Miami? People assume he's coming to Philadelphia because of Ben Simmons. I'm not saying any of these are out of the realm of possibility. But what I am saying is there's two things we know for sure about LeBron. One, LeBron can do whatever he wants, and he doesn't care what your rationalization is for where he should or shouldn't go. And two, this is not a money issue. I keep hearing about how the Sixers have salary cap, and the Lakers are maneuvering for salary cap, and the Rockets are maneuvering for salary cap. And stop. Just stop. LeBron James doesn't need a max contract. He took less money to go to Miami. He has a lifetime Nike contract that is worth more than $1 billion. Money and cap space will not prevent LeBron from going wherever he wants to go. Don't focus on the money. Focus on the relationships. When LeBron chose to go to Miami with Chris Bosh and join his friend Dwayne Wade, and at the time, him and Pat Riley had a good relationship. Him and Dwayne Wade are still boys. LeBron is more about the relationship than he is about the money. Do not overlook the relationship he has with Jerry West. Do not overlook the respect he has for Magic Johnson. And don't overlook the fact that when LeBron and Kevin Durant did the Uber ride along with Kerry Champion, where did they do it? They did it in Akron. They didn't go to LA. They didn't go to San Francisco. They didn't go to Houston. They didn't go to New York. They did it in Akron. LeBron made Kerry Champion, the film crew, and Kevin Durant go to Akron, Ohio. And what did he do? Oh, that's the place, he points out and says, that's the place I first learned how to play basketball. And these are the different places from my lifehood, my childhood. LeBron will make people come to him. And they will. Don't overlook the fact that LeBron can stay in Cleveland one more year. Not because he has to, but just because he wants to. I think there's a part of LeBron that doesn't want to feel forced into any decision. And at the end of the day, LA is very appealing because it has a house out there. He's moved a lot of his media properties out there. He's got a lot of friends and relationships out there, and he wants to become a mogul. Guess what? Is it easier to become a mogul where? In LA. Oh, and let's not forget, if he does join the Clippers and he wins a title with them, he'll be probably the only player in the NBA with multiple statues in different cities. By the time LeBron's in his 60s, he could have a statue in Miami, a statue in Cleveland, and a statue in LA. Amazing. Black Panther made $201.7 million over President's Day weekend in North America, according to Disney's latest estimates. The film premiered Thursday night screenings, and then, of course, Monday was President's Day, so they had a 4-day surge to work off of. The success makes Black Panther the 5th largest movie opening of all time, just behind other Disney properties like The Avengers, Star Wars The Force Awakens, and Star Wars The Last Jedi. And this is a big deal because Black Panther is not your traditional Marvel superhero movie. It's a different style, just like Ant-Man was a different style, just like Deadpool was a different style. Different is very intriguing. It's very attractive. It draws a different audience in. And I think that's what Black Panther was going for. It wasn't going for the traditional look. Black Panther's debut also beat out 20th Century Fox's Deadpool for the biggest opening in February all time. Deadpool pulled in $132 million domestically when it debuted in 2016. Black Panther has pulled in $242 million. That's $110 million more over a 4-day period versus what Deadpool did. And it has already grossed $14 million more than DC's Justice League's entire theatrical run. I'm going to dig more deep into Black Panther and what I thought about it and what I liked about it in the epilogue, but I'm just going to tell you right now, don't believe everything you read online about it. This is not a black film, quote unquote. This is not a liberal or conservative or no. This is a movie that has a lot of social things it answers and deals with. And it's not political. And people who are making it political can't see the forest for the trees. NBA All-Star Game on TNT generated a 4.3 rating, which ranks third behind this year's Pro Bowl on ESPN at a 5.3. So the NFL is still king. I think that we all knew that. And the NBA being on TNT may not fully help them because a TNT is not a platform that is easily tracked with online. Like, for example, when the NFL has Thursday Night Football on Twitter or Amazon, you can get those numbers pretty quick. That's a quick turnaround. That's easy to figure out. You know, the NFL can track a lot of the traffic digitally. They just choose not to release it because a lot of their advertisers are still insistent on the TV numbers and not the digital numbers. Well, the NBA through NBA TV can track a lot of numbers on NBA TV Or, for example, for the 76ers, they have the relationship with NBC Sports Philadelphia. So the NBC Sports Philadelphia has an app. NBC Sports has an app. And you can watch a lot of games, so you can track it on there. TNT doesn't have a TNT Sports app, per se. So it's hard to track what the audience is on the non-traditional linear television platform. So, yeah, the NBA probably did better than a 4.3 rating. But the point is that it's still behind the NFL. And that's not a bad thing, because this is the first year, 2018, according to Forbes, that the NBA has every team worth $1 billion. The NBA has come a long way. And I would argue the NBA does their All-Star Showcase better than any other league. Period. The Home Run Derby is arguably a better product than the Baseball All-Star Game. The Baseball All-Star Game, in many ways, they're trying to reclaim an audience that they lost, because baseball is losing viewers. And so they try to incentivize people to watch their All-Star Game. Well, the Home Run Derby is where it's at. The game itself is a little disjointed, and there's a lot of substitutions. They're trying to get everybody into the game. The Pro Bowl, it did well this year, but the NFL is king, and it doesn't matter if the brand of football on the Pro Bowl isn't what we see during the regular season. People like me, we're still watching the Pro Bowl. The NHL has done such a poor job at promoting their league. Many people don't even know when the All-Star Game is. With the whole 3-on-3 setup, it's just a gimmick. It's not even really entertaining hockey. So the NBA, in their desire to keep evolving, what did they say? How can we make the All-Star Game better? LeBron versus Steph. The game was competitive. The game was fun. It was engaging. I mean, they were trapping. They were playing full court press. They were blocking shots. It was such a fun game to watch from beginning to end. And I think that as soon as they bring in that draft next year on television, watch out. Because I think in a couple of years, the NBA All-Star Game has the potential to be one of the highest rated basketball programs in that calendar year. Typically, year in and year out, the NBA Finals have been the highest rated NBA product on television. But the All-Star Game has the potential to be just as big, because basketball is the one All-Star Game that, unlike baseball, you get the best of the best. In baseball, the All-Star Game is we got to represent from each team. In football, you don't even have the Super Bowl participants in there, or guys are out with injuries, or guys sit out because they just don't want to deal with the hitting and they don't want to go to Orlando. Maybe, who knows? When it was in Hawaii, more guys wanted to go out there. Basketball, every guy has got an ego, and this is the biggest stage for them to show off how good they are. And you saw in that game, whether it was Damian Lillard, whether it was Joel Embiid, whether it was Giannis Antetokounmpo, whoever it was, every guy wanted to show how great they were. And the guy who wanted it most, again, was LeBron. Oh, and by the way, after the game, back to our topic about LeBron earlier, LeBron talked about how great LA is. Again, multiple times. Man, he is just stirring the pot, isn't he? I mentioned the Justice League earlier. So, for those who don't realize or didn't know about this, the DCEU, which is a Detective Comics Extended Universe, which is DC Comics version of the MCU, which is Marvel Cinematic Universe. They took a major hit, them and Warner Brothers, with Justice League. It did not perform very well at the box office. It came up very short in multiple ways. And there have been a lot of rumors out there about what DC is going to do. There's a lot of rumors that they were going to mix things up, change the whole future of the properties. Well, what we can confirm is that Aquaman is currently in production and targeted for a December release, while the Shazam movie is also in production, and the Wonder Woman sequel is currently in the casting stages. So we know specifically about 3 DC movies coming up. The reason why this is important to bring up is because a lot of people don't understand what DC is doing. And that's because DC doesn't know what they're doing. DC tried to accelerate a process that took Marvel years. See, this is where Marvel is better than DC at this. Marvel said, We're going to take a B-level character in Iron Man and make him a superstar. We're going to take another B-level character in Thor, whose comics don't even sell well for the majority of his time on the Marvel comic basis. We're going to make him a star. And then we're going to take Captain America, and we're going to interwove him into all of this. And then we're going to take, C-level characters like Black Widow and Hawkeye. Well, Hawkeye's actually a D-level character when you think about it, when you get into comic book history. Because remember, Marvel didn't have the rights to Spider-Man until recently. They don't have the rights to the X-Men, the Fantastic Four. So their three biggest names historically in their comic books, they couldn't even use them. And what did they do? They built an entire universe, and they had a plan. The phase 1, the phase 2, the phase 3. And it's been executed at such a high level that everybody wanted a Marvel movie. Benedict Cumberbatch doesn't want to be in a DC movie. He wanted to be in a Marvel movie. And he got to be Doctor Strange. And he was amazing at it. You notice that Michael B. Jordan has never been in a DC movie. Only a Marvel movie. 2 of them. Chris Evans, same deal. And it's not that DC can't do well, but they're struggling because they couldn't be as successful with their 3 biggest stars as Marvel was with some of their B and C list level characters. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are 3 of the biggest comic book characters in world history. Superman's been around since the 1930s. Wonder Woman and Batman have been around since the 40s and the 50s in comics, different variations. And yet, what did they do? They put together a movie in Justice League where the director who was originally directing it had to leave early because of personal issues. And they had to call in Joss Whedon to clean it up. He reshot scenes. And the movie, let's be realistic, it doesn't meet the same level of quality and oomph as a Marvel movie. So, what we do know for the Aquaman movie is I think Aquaman has a chance to be good because I think that the people who are working on Aquaman understand that they're doing something that's never been done before. There's no Marvel movie that's been done in Atlantis. The guys who involved in Atlantis in Marvel Comics, they haven't even used them at all in the movies. So they have a chance to do something that Marvel has never done. And if they do it right, it can be a great visual movie and do well. The Shazam movie, that's going to be hit or miss. Because Shazam is a character that is a gimmick in and of himself. For those who don't know, Shazam, who was originally called Captain Marvel, he's marvelous, he's amazing, decades ago, he was a guy who was a kid. And every time he would say Shazam, he'd become a guy who looks like Superman. And the idea was he's as fast as Achilles, and he's stronger than Hercules, and he has the power of Zeus. All this stuff. He basically is a mythical Superman. And the idea is that he's going to fight his arch nemesis, Black Adam, who's another version of him from another planet. And he'll have to fight him. And it's probably going to be... I have no expectations for the Shazam movie. I think this could either be interesting and fun, or it could be one of the dumbest things you've ever seen in your life. So don't get your hopes up for that. What is interesting with the Wonder Woman sequel is that because they did such an amazing job with Wonder Woman, I mean, that was arguably the best DC movie of all the DC movies. I think this could be a lot of fun as well. And then there's the other movie that we know for sure. Ezra Miller played the character of the Flash in Justice League. And his movie that is coming out, the Flash movie, is called Flashpoint. And this is an important twist because this is where DC can save themselves. This is where Warner Brothers and the head of DC, Jeff Johns, and with new writer Michael Bendis, who they stole from Marvel, they can come in here and they can use Flashpoint's story to fix all their problems. Because see, in the Flashpoint storyline, the story in the comics is about Flash going back in time, stopping his mother from dying, and he comes back in the future and finds out that the world is totally different. And then he has to learn how to get his Flash powers back again so he can go back in time, allow his mother to die, And he comes back in the future and he finds out that some things are the same, as it were, but certain things are different. And it's an interesting movie to use because it's a great way for DC to recast Batman. They can make any modifications they want to the Batman universe. They can introduce a Green Lantern after that. Maybe if the Shazam movie doesn't do well, they can make it act like that didn't ever happen. Because remember, when Bryan Singer came back to the X-Men franchise, when he made Days of Future Past, and they did all the time travel and the changing of the future, what that allowed them to do was to say, remember that X-Men 3 movie, Last Stand, and remember the Wolverine Origins movie, and all the other things you didn't like with the X-Men movie? Yeah, we erased all them. Those things didn't happen. We got rid of all of them. So I could see them doing the same thing that Bryan Singer did with Flashpoint, which is it allows them to recast and act like certain things never happened. You want to act like the Suicide Squad movie didn't happen, or Shazam didn't happen, or you want to recast Batman. You want to you want to introduce more Batman people into the universe, and not to explain why Batman is so old, and why he has the Killing Joke Robin suit in his Batcave. You don't want to explain all these things. Here's how you can do it. And I think if DC allows Michael Bendis to be as involved as they imply he could be, Michael Bendis could help salvage and save them with these movies, because Michael Bendis, when he wrote the Ultimate Universe, he rewrote every Marvel character in a way that had never been done before. And some people, it was extreme, and it was radical, and some people considered it sacrilegious. But other people said, you know what, that's not what I'm used to, but I appreciate it, and I really do enjoy it. So I think Bendis could really help Jeff Johns clean up a lot of mess. I think Flashpoint is a linchpin for it. So we know for sure that the only DC movie this year looks like it's going to be Aquaman, and that'll be December, which could end up being November, because we know that DC sometimes overestimates how long a movie is going to take. They did that for Man of Steel. They did that for Wonder Woman. Originally, Man of Steel was supposed to be a July 4th release. It came out as a Father's Day weekend, I believe, release. Wonder Woman was supposed to be a month later as well. It came out a month earlier. The Justice League was supposed to be a few months later, and they found a way to pull it back even despite all the delays. So DC may actually get Aquaman out by November, but right now it looks like it's December. All right, fifth topic we got here is Mark Cuban has been fined $600,000 for saying on a podcast, funny how that works, that he explained to his team they are tanking this season. Now, according to Darren Ravel, the fining of Mark Cuban is the equivalent of the average American being fined $28, because Cuban's worth is $3.7 billion. So $600,000 seems like a crazy number, but for Mark Cuban, it's not that big a deal. Now, I will say this. It's a big deal because it's one of the largest amounts fined ever for an NBA owner in league history. So that's why it's significant. But the irony of all this is that it's Cuban admitting to tanking when he's the same guy a couple of years ago who condemned tanking. But his own organization dug themselves into a financial hole, and they desperately need to reload with younger, higher-level talent, which is why 8 other teams are doing the same thing the Mavs are doing, which is they're gunning for that top 10 NBA draft pick. Teams like the Hawks, Suns, the Kings, the Magic, the Grizzlies, they're all hoping to get one of those top picks, because none of them have what they need to be an elite team. But the big difference between the Mavs and those other teams is that those other teams are not dealing with accusations of a hostile workplace. The SI article is scathing. It says that it basically paints a picture that what's going on in the Mavs organization is similar to what happened with the Panthers with Jerry Richardson. Except the difference is that in Jerry Richardson's situation, he was the guy doing the despicable acts and the despicable things. And in Cuban's workplace, he was negligent and didn't know about the bad things that were going on in his workplace. So, Dallas has got a lot of problems, and Mark Cuban's got a lot of fires to put out right now between the tanking and the league being mad at him and his own workplace now being under higher scrutiny because of the SI story. I think that the good that can come out of what Mark Cuban said in this fine is that the league is finally going to start accelerating the conversation of how can we stop tanking. And the way to stop tanking is to radically reform the draft. You got to find a way that you either incentivize these teams to win or you incentivize them to not be horrible. So, whether that's, if you are the two teams, if for example, we know that 16 teams every year make the postseason. So of the other teams in the league that don't make the postseason, you want to see the teams that come in ninth place, they get first and second picks, and then, break it down from there so that the team that gets, what would be a mid-draft pick will be the team with the worst record. You could do that. You could do a situation where you just give everybody the same odds. So every team doesn't make the playoffs. They all have the same odds to gain the first overall pick. You could do that. You just have to find a way to not incentivize people to do like the Colts. The people said, remember when the Colts, when they were bad, it was suck for Luck. It was suck for Andrew Luck. All right, that was the phrase everybody kept saying. When Ben Simmons was coming out, it was don't win for Simmons. People come up with all these things, and I think that the league, because of the Mark Cuban situation with what he said about tanking, I think they can finally start having that brutal conversation among the owners about this has to stop. You started the conversation when you forced out Sam Hinkie in Philadelphia, and you forced Jerry Colangelo onto the Sixers organization, and then he brings in his son Brian Colangelo, and Sam Hinkie now is teaching over at Stanford, and enjoying his life out of the spotlight, which, if you go based on the different articles out there, he seems happier doing that job, being out in Stanford with all those, intellectual people who come up with all these crazy and great ideas than he was working with the Sixers organization. So, and I know a lot of people say that, Sam Hinkie, when's he coming back? Look, there's a part of me that wonders, I don't know if Sam Hinkie wants to come back. He seems a lot happier not being in the NBA than being in the NBA. But because of Sam Hinkie's tanking and trusting the process, guess what? Now the league, between that and Mark Cuban's comments about tanking, and how many times did they find Magic Johnson now? We're talking about other players now. It's getting out of control. And I think the league, they care a lot about their image, and they understand they need to be progressive, because the only way for them to keep up with the big money of the NFL is to keep evolving. And I think the next evolution is going to be changing the draft lottery. And I think Mark Cuban's comments, while the money seems like a lot, $600,000, it's not the money. It's the fact that the league is taking notice. Final bottle in our six-pack to start this podcast is, speaking of scandals and punishments, the NCAA, in their unmeasured desire to show everyone how big, bad, and tough and powerful they are. Note the sarcasm. Louisville is being forced to vacate all of their wins from 2011 and 2015, including their national championship in 2013 and the 2012 Final Four appearance. Look, that scandal that involved Louisville with the kids, and basically, it was basically like a sex deal. It was basically trading favors. All right. And then the whole shoe deal and the manipulation of the agent, all the money that changed hands between the shoe company and the agent, and then the former coaches. Look, it's all bad. It looks bad. But taking away scholarships and vacating wins, it's such a cheap punishment. It's such a weak punishment. Let's be realistic. You're not punishing the people who did the thing wrong. The NCAA is the dude who goes up to somebody, breaks a bottle over their head at the bar, and then goes and hides. and then points at somebody else and then gets a lawyer and blames you for the ball being broken over your head. The NCAA is pathetic. Vacating wins is stupid. National championships, even more dumb. We all saw Louisville win. We all saw Reggie Bush win the Heisman. Don't act like it didn't happen. That's pathetic. That's childish. You want to actually punish people? How about punish Rick Pitino for being negligent? How about punishing the athletic director? Don't punish the kids who are involved in the program. Don't punish the kids who weren't involved in the scandal. Don't punish the people who are the innocents and involved in this. That's what I hate about all this. You're punishing people who had nothing to do with, oh, you're punishing the university. Look, for every dime they don't make off the national championship, they'll make up for that money somewhere else. These universities make tons and tons and tons of money. Taking away their ability to promote they had a national championship isn't going to do anything in the long run. The NCAA, whether it's Louisville or Penn State or SMU or USC or Miami, all these punishments mean nothing in the long run. Because at the end of the day, you're not punishing the guilty, you're punishing the innocent and the people who had nothing to do with it. And you know what? Maybe it's a good thing the FBI is now investigating what happened at Louisville and getting involved in these shoe contracts. Because you know what? Maybe the NCAA can slowly be phased out of their power, and we can just take people like Rick Pitino and you know, the boosters and the people with the shoe deals, the people who hire all the girls to come in and have special sexy time with the recruits, punish them, put them in jail. You want to clean it up, bring out the gates, put them behind bars. People are never going to stop doing these things. If the punishment is, well, you still get to make all that money, but you can't coach anymore. Do you really think Rick Pitino is that miserable? The dude's a millionaire. Jim Tressel. Really? You remember Dennis Erickson? He still had it. He still got other jobs after he left Miami. It's not like these guys are without work. But who suffers? It's the kids at Penn State when they had the probation, they couldn't go to the postseason, who had nothing to do with Sandusky and Paterno and the AD and all that stuff. It was them who suffered because they didn't get to go to a bowl game. They didn't have the chance to play for certain opportunities. And they were the ones who had the less amount of scholarships, so there were less kids who could actually go to school without having to pay the exorbitant price of academia. NCAA trying to act like they're all big and bad. They're not big and bad. They just like to throw their weight around. And that's your inaugural six-pack here on the Mutant Blitz Podcast. Josh Hennig, hanging out with you. Coming up next, my one-on-one conversation with Dizz, the underground insider from Talk MMA on Twitter, at Talk MMA on Twitter. And after that, my epilogue on the Black Panther movie. And welcome to the one-on-one conversation here on the Mutant Blitz Podcast. I am Josh Hennig, your host. And my first guest ever on the podcast, it's only appropriate that he is the guest. He's a buddy of mine. He's the premier MMA underground insider because everyone's too afraid to hire him officially. You know, unofficially, they'll take things from him, but officially, nobody wants to acknowledge him half the time. Dizz of at Talk MMA on Twitter. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, how you doing? I forgot the debut guest for the debuting Mutant Blitz podcast. Congratulations, man! This is a step in another direction for you, brother.
Yeah, notice how you didn't say a step up. It's a step in another direction, exactly. So,
I guess we'll all find out whether or not it's a step up in the future.
Yeah. So, part of the reason why I wanted to have you on is because there's a couple of topics that I want to get into, and I've always wanted to have a public conversation with you about this. We've kind of had this conversation off the radio and you know through text messages and stuff, but we really haven't gotten into it in public. And I want to start out with the specific topic of the state of MMA in 2018 because, you see on the UFC events, they got the 25 on the bottom label of the list. Look, we all get it. The start of modern day, what we know as mixed martial arts started with the UFC 25 years ago as it was being consumed in the mainstream. But a lot has changed over those 25 years. A lot has changed over the last 10 years, the last 5 years. It's 2018 now. It's not 2010 anymore. It's not, Chuck Liddell is old and, all this stuff. It's a different world it is today than it was even 10 years ago. So what is the state of MMA in 2018, my friend?
Well, the state of MMA currently is it's gotten kind of stale. And the reason being is because there are so many promotions. There are so many promotions, so many fighters. There are so many people who don't want to go get a regular job, so they take up fighting when they realize, wow, at this level, and I'm speaking regional and below, I do have to go get a regular job so I can do this, so I can, advance forward. If you're not a transcendent fighter, it's a lot harder for you. The state of MMA currently right now is just so saturated that even the UFC right now, the father of all promotions, can't even, their pay-per-view buys are substantially lower than what they used to be. I covered that on my last podcast episode there towards the end of 2017, that one guy's podcast, about dividends and transcendent fighters and why the UFC is doing so poorly right now in pay-per-views, and that's because there's a lot more options to watch it. Yes, I mean people would rather illegally stream an event and watch it that way than give somebody the $60 for a pay-per-view where the main event's probably been scrapped because of an injury or somebody was, come in overweight or, whatever the reason may be at that time.
Well, here's the thing I'm thinking of, because you mentioned the money. Sometimes I always thought, well, with HD now, it's kind of priced some people out of the market. But, when I go out, I also see people out at, the bars and, the clubs where they show the UFC events, and they're spending a lot of money for the rights to stream those events usually. So it's not like it's totally cost prohibitive, but there is a part of me that wonders, you look at what the NBA is doing in certain cities and the NFL is doing in certain cities. They're pricing their own fans out of the seats. You go to a Warriors game. They talk about the fact that half the Warriors fans are all corporate people. So they have the worst home field advantage, in their case, home court, in all of sports. So is it in some ways the UFC is almost outpricing their own viewers?
I wouldn't, not necessarily. I mean, in terms of pay-per-view and television, yeah. Do I think that they could go lower on pay-per-views and still profit? Absolutely. But in terms of live viewers and people showing up to the arena, to whatever venue they're at that time, I don't think they're having any problems getting people in the door because the UFC doesn't always come to town. The other problem with that is that you have the UFC, who's under new ownership right now, and my problem with the ownership that they are not MMA and fight fans; they're businessmen, and there's a big difference there. They're talent agents. William Morris Endeavor. It's not really. You need a fight. You need a fight fan in the business to run that business.
But real quick, even before they were fight fan, even before when it was the Fertittas and Dana only guys in charge, even then they were starting to get away from what made them in some ways, because I go back to the mid 2000s, right? Obviously guys like you and I have been watching MMA longer than most people, but you go to when it started becoming mainstream, after The Ultimate Fighter on TV, and you saw they went out of their way to create stars out of nobodies. Nobody gave a darn who Chuck Liddell was, and who the hell is Randy Couture, and who the hell are these people? Why do I give a damn about Pride? And the UFC went out of their way to make everybody this star, and it was so. We were like, wow, like that's actually kind of impressive. Like you're taking this nobody and turning him into the star, and now it's almost like they want stars handed to them.
Well, yes and no. I agree and I disagree, and the reason being is because they had half the roster size then, or even a quarter of the roster size then. Last Sunday night was the UFC Fight Night with Donald Cowboy Cerrone and Yancy Medeiros. Can you name 4 people that were on the Fox mid card or the undercard? Can you name 4 people off of that?
I knew more people off the prelims.
What's that?
I knew more people from the prelims.
Where I'm going with this is on the average card. The average card nowadays, most people can't name 4 people that are on the undercard.
Right.
Most people don't even know who's on the undercard. They look at the main event only nowadays, and they go, well, I'll decide whether or not I want to watch that or not. Or if they have a special fighter, maybe who might be on Fight Pass or the FS1 prelims that they decide that they want to watch. But now they have 5 times the roster size that they used to have. It was easy to promote Chuck Liddell. It was easy to promote Tito Ortiz or Randy Couture or one of the 6 heavyweights that actually fought in the UFC at that time. It was easy. It's now you have to see who's going to step up. Now, let's go with the obvious. Conor McGregor. Everybody's going to bring up McGregor, and why is that? Because he's the only guy who has stepped up the way he did and backed everything up inside the octagon the way he did it. Unfortunately, he's not backing up much right now. He's just kind of waiting for that other Floyd fight. And sources obviously tell me that that's going to take place in a boxing ring and as a rematch.
Not surprising because really quick, not to interrupt you, we both know, you and I both know, that there's more money still in boxing than there is in MMA.
No, of course there is. Of course there is. And all those MMA fans are going to watch that, and Floyd knows it. Do you think he wants to go to the ground? Do you think he wants to be taken down to the ground and have the crap beaten out of him by Conor McGregor and smear anything he's ever done in his entire life? No, he's not.
You think the James Toney fight versus Randy Couture was bad? Floyd would be worse because he's smaller.
James Toney was just a broke fool, and that's why he went for the Randy Couture fight. He thought it was going to be a knockout.
But James was a big boy. He was way past his prime and way out of shape. Floyd, he's got those chicken legs. He ain't stopping nothing.
Absolutely. But getting back on topic, we have it's now up to the fighters. Listen, here's the thing. Here's the machine. You've got the UFC. That's the machine. What we're going to do now is that we're going to give you, here's your stage. Show us what you can do. You show them what you can do, and you're going to get those advertisements. You're going to get the extra space. You're going to get that push. But if you're going to stand there, and I'll tell you what, here's the thing too. Fans don't like whiners. They don't like complainers. They don't like crybabies.
Oh, you mean like Tyron Woodley?
Tyron Woodley, Demetrius Johnson, Cyborg even. Chris Cyborg now has become a whiner. That's all she does is complain. They want to give me fight. They want to give me featherweight champion fighters. Well, yeah, you know why? Because I can't count on 5 hands actual featherweights who can who actually look like you.
There's like 2 or 3.
There, maybe. I mean, they had to go get a taekwondo champion from Russia, a hot one, by the way. I don't know what they're doing in Russia over the years, but, man, they know how to breed some women.
All I can think of is the song "There's Something in the Water."
Well, they've got a lot of stuff in the water out there. But anyway, I mean, we're a Cyborg. And
but here's the thing, Cyborg's a niche anyway. That's a whole nother dimension of conversations. But guys like Woodley, Demetrius, he doesn't seem as much of a complainer to me because I do feel like in some ways the UFC just kind of like poo-poos him because he's a smaller weight class. But a guy like Tyrone, he's been given ample opportunities on FS1 and ESPN, and I feel like every week he's on that TMZ video vlog thing.
And his right, I was getting ready to say, in his position on TMZ, they pushed that contract, on TMZ for him.
Right.
So,
I mean, the dude has a million outlets and always complains about nobody likes me, nobody takes care of me. Dude, you don't take care of yourself.
He doesn't. No, he doesn't. And like I said, first of all, the biggest mistake he ever made was falling into the political propaganda of calling his employers racist. He should have never have done that. It was a knee-jerk reaction off. It was a knee-jerk reaction off of one fan who called him the N-word.
Yeah, one idiot does not represent everybody.
Employer is racist.
One idiot doesn't represent everybody. And that's the problem.
LeBron James's staff in California didn't even see that word. That, by the way, that's why Talk MMA's Twitter handle is suspended at this moment, is because I called out LeBron James's staff. I called out LeBron James on Twitter and asked him to investigate his California staff and why they lied to him about a fake hate crime.
And that should answer everything you need to know about that, right?
Oh yeah. Who sprays out the word before the cops show up?
Right. Nobody
does that.
So back to these fighters. You mentioned the champions. You know what? I remember years ago, and it feels like a forever ago because of who I'm going to name. I remember when Lyoto Machida beat Rashad Evans.
Yeah.
And one of the first things he said after he won that fight was, I'm moving to America and I'm going to learn English. And that's the only thing he knew in English.
Right.
And he did. He moved to California. And then there was the whole, 2 fights with Hua. And, that was the beginning of the end for both of them. But still, it was a different world back then. And that was only, 8 years ago? Nowadays, these champions outside of Stipe, most of these guys, outside of Stipe and Max Holloway, almost every other champion either doesn't understand what it means to be a champion, or they're so self-absorbed they can't see anything else.
They try too hard to be Conor McGregor. They see the money that he makes, and they think that they're doing. Do you ever watch like a professional basketball player with his child? And the professional basketball player obviously is just in his driveway. He's shooting a basketball, and he's got great form. Probably makes 5, 6, 7 shots in a row before missing one.
Right.
And you see his son trying to mimic him, and obviously his son doesn't have as much experience, and he doesn't have the time in. So it looks a little sloppier. Not all the shots, not as many of the shots at a higher percentage go in. Well, that's kind of how it is with Conor McGregor and all these other champions. As of right now, he's the godfather. He is the father, the king of the pay-per-view mark in the UFC at the moment. Everybody else is just their sibling, or is just the son on the way down. You have the kids trying to mimic Conor McGregor, and it's just a little sloppy. The only other people that can pull off the ratings the way Conor McGregor does it, and in the fashion that he does it right now, is Nick and Nate Diaz. There's John Jones. John Jones doesn't even have to really insult you.
And by the way, can we remind people that the Diaz brothers were doing it way before McGregor ever showed up?
They were doing it long before McGregor showed up.
I remember what was it? Was it UFC 60, 62? When Nick had that fight, and after the fight, he just started dropping F-bombs on the mic and calling out half the world.
Well, I mean, it could be 62, but it could have been a lot of them.
Well, no, I meant whatever his last fight was before he went to Strikeforce. Because remember, the UFC was like, we don't want you here anymore. And they pushed him out the door. He went to Strikeforce. He was like, fine, I'll go over there. But whatever his last fight was, I mean, he literally just like, it almost sounded like it almost felt like it was, if the WWE was rated X, this is what they would sound like. And that's what Nick Diaz sounded like after that fight. And immediately his contract was either terminated or not renewed with the UFC.
I think what you're referring to is UFC 65 with Gleison Tibau.
Yeah.
Because he had gotten a TK over Tibau in the second round and then just went off on the mic.
Yep, that's it.
And then from there he went to Pride, Elite XC, etc. So,
yep. But my point is that, you're right. It's a certain type of person, not just personality, person that can be that kind of polarizing, enigmatic figure. And it's not the personality that sells. It's the fact that what Conor does, what the Diaz guys do, that's part of who they are.
It's part of who they are, but it's also fighting. People forget that this is fighting. This is not croquet or basketball or baseball where they have a written conduct, an unspoken conduct of not throwing your bat or whatever. This is fighting. This is two people half naked with 4-ounce gloves trying to hurt each other. And that's what made the sport so popular in the first place. We've gotten soft.
Well, the whole world's gotten soft.
The sport's gotten soft. And the only people who really seem to still get it is Dana White. The UFC president seems to be about the only guy who still gets it. But, he's older now. His time with the UFC is going to come to an end. He's going to take over the Zuffa boxing, and he's going to start a boxing promotion.
And let's not forget, that's where Dana got his start. It wasn't MMA, it was boxing.
And he was a boxing aerobics instructor.
That's how I met Tito.
But it's fighting. People have got to understand, and especially these journalists. Don't get me started on the journalists. MMA media mostly today is so horrible. I remember when Ronda was quiet for an entire year, didn't speak of her fight with Holly Holm. She said one thing a year later. That, I just want to say, that is what you call breaking your silence. Not waiting a couple of hours after the press conference of a loss and say, break silence after. I don't know where all these journalists are getting that, but that's such an asinine approach to media.
Here's the problem with the so-called journalists, and I'm kind of stealing this from a buddy of mine. For those who may not remember, the guy Michael Straka, he used to do a lot of work with Bellator. I think he's still on.
I love Mike Straka. He's a buddy of mine.
So Mike turned to me, and this was maybe back in I want to say 2011 or 2012. And him and I were just having a nice conversation. And we were around other people, so I know it wasn't off-the-record conversation. But he turned to me and said, the problem is, he said, is that about 33% of all people who call themselves media journalists are people who have no journalism experience. And they use the words media and journalism because they have a website or they have a podcast or like this. No, just kidding. Or because they have a blog, and they think because they have a blog and that they're 22 years old and they've never had a real job in their life, that they're an MMA journalist. And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he says, you don't want to be that guy.
Right. No, he's right. I have a rinky-dink podcast right now, but I expect it to grow over the course of 2018.
No, but the difference is it's not about the podcast. It's about the fact that there's a certain kind of person who wants to be heard, but they don't want to earn their stripes. They don't want to go through the work. Look, I've worked in radio now for almost 12 years. Before I got into radio, I was a newspaper writer, okay? And I'm in my 30s. I've paid my dues. I've worked my way up the ladder. I've earned where I've gotten. And there's a bunch of people who think they should just be handed opportunities. And because they think they're handed opportunities, what do? They'll go, they can't get a credential for UFC, so they'll go cover PFL or Bellator, and at the post-fight press conference, Mitrione will be at the press conference. Hey, Matt, what's it feel like to be on top of another man?
Yeah. You know, and I got to tell you, too, most of these guys, I even wonder if they are really fight fans or not, most of these media guys, or if it was just an easy way just to get a title. But, man, I got to tell you, from a long time ago, you know, I asked a very famed MMA journalist when I was a fan of his, just a fanboy. This is about 8 or 9 years ago. You know, hey, listen, you know, I want to do this. I'd like to be a journalist. What do I do to get started? He asked me what I did for a living currently. And when I told him what I did for a living currently, he looked at me and said, you just stick with that because there's not a whole lot of room for people like you here. It was an arrogant response. It was defensive. It sounded like he was threatened. But here's my thing. The more I started connecting with MMA journalists, the more I figured out how much I don't have in common with them. I did not want that arrogance to consume me. I did not want to be like them, even though I could be a journalist anyways. If that's what it takes to be an MMA journalist, I want no part of it. I do not want to be arrogant. I don't want to walk around like my opinion means something and yours don't mean jack. I did not want that. So, and that's why I have increased popularity, is because I'll tell somebody, okay, well, that's your opinion. I mean, I can agree to disagree, but here's the facts. And once these people see the facts, after I've shown them the facts, or sometimes there's things that I cannot say publicly that I can ask somebody not to say anything if I tell you this. Listen, I'll show you this one. And I've done it with you.
Yeah.
I've
done it with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've sent you screen flashes of private conversations I've had, and, you know, and I, with great confidence. I don't think you've ever shared them. So my thing with that is that there's just certain things you can't say publicly. But that's why I get more trust than a lot of the MMA journalists, because MMA journalists have big mouths
and really
they
quick,
want those clicks.
And real quick, before we move on, there's two things I want to do real quick here. One, I want us to name real quick the good MMA journalists, because I think sometimes we live in a world where everything is always negative. And I always like to try to spin it and make sure, listen, there is a differentiation line here.
Dwayne Fenley. Dwayne Fenley is he won't even tell you that he's an MMA journalist. He is a storyteller. Dwayne Fenley. He's formerly with Bleacher Report, and he was also with Flow Combat. He's actually taking a break right now.
I don't blame him for that.
I don't blame him at all. Something I'll tell you. I'll tell you off air. Give me a call after. Call me personally right after this.
Yeah, we'll talk later. I want to name a guy myself, and that's Brett Okamoto. First of all, most people don't know is that Brett does probably 80% of the work for the ESPN MMA coverage. And there's a lot of times where if you click on a UFC MMA story and it says staff writer or something like that, it's probably him. I know some people don't like him because he's not the most personable or doesn't have like this vibrant, crazy personality. But the guy he works hard, he asks good questions, and he wants to try to get it right. He's not one of these guys.
He's not a snake.
What's that?
He's not a snake.
Exactly. All right, so let's wrap this conversation up here. So, and again, my friend, I always appreciate you taking the time, as you always do for me.
Hey, anytime for you.
So, what is the future of MMA? Like, and before you answer it, because I look at it like this: MMA has it grown? Absolutely. Is it more recognized than ever? Yes, but in many ways, it's still a niche sport. You know, to me, MMA right now, it's much closer to hockey than it is other sports. It's a sport that is national and international, but it's not ahead of the other big sports.
Right. Well, okay, so here's the thing about MMA. MMA is always going to be a niche sport. Okay, it always will be. It's like I said earlier in this interview. This is fighting. It's two guys getting half naked and trying to beat the shit out of each other. Okay? So, but if you want it to expand, you need to keep its luster. You need to keep that
edge,
that masculine, yes, the edge, that masculine bravado. I mean, there's some women who are more masculine, some of the men's, and I don't mean that because they look like it. Some of them are very beautiful, but like tougher mentally. They're tougher mentally than most of these guys are. I've seen some guys give up where I've seen women,
right?
You know, a couple of females here and there, like still, like, oh my gosh, I was like, she's still bringing that heat. She's getting busted up, and she's still bringing. Some of these guys are just kind of like, hey, I'll just give you an arm, you tap me out, please.
Well, look at the fight real quick on Sunday. Look at the fight on Sunday with Sarah Moran, and what was the girl from the Czech Republic's name?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Remember the fight on Sunday? It was Sarah Moran versus what was the girl from the Czech Republic who won?
I don't even know if I can pronounce your name right.
It's gonna bother me. I gotta look it up now, but like
I'm actually gonna have to bring that up and look at it. Let's see here. Pudilova, Lucy Pudilova,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Moran had Pudilova in a armbar, and it looked like she was going to break her arm. What did she do?
Yeah, she just toughed right out of it.
She just toughed right out of it, kept turning and turning and turning, and eventually she got out of it.
She had slight hyperextension. It didn't go hyperextended all the way. She only had slight hyperextension. With some people, they do have slight hyperextended joints.
Right.
But yeah, she toughed right out of it. Some guys would have tapped out and just said, screw it.
Yep.
But in defense of those guys, they are fighting men who are much stronger than women.
No, but the point is what you said. It's about having an edge. It's about having want. It's about stepping up and saying, "Listen, I need to win."
Well, sometimes they don't need to win that bad. They'd rather keep their arm. So, okay, so. I mean, bottom line, you got to keep the masculinity in the sport. The men are the ones who are going to sell. Not everybody's Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey transcended the sport from women in MMA. But even though I think she's going to be a continuously dominant champion, there's just something about Amanda Nunes is just not as transcendent. I think that she could be, but it's people have got to stop trying to soften up the sport. Let the sport take its course. Raw emotion is attractive for some reason. Some people don't think so, but they're also a lot of people who don't think raw emotion is attractive are also the same people who are not acting with raw emotion at that moment. Their minds are very clear. So once an individual realizes and accepts that things happen in the heat of the moment in fighting, you ever gone to a bar and somebody calculated a fight? I mean, have you ever seen a calculated bar fight? I've never seen a calculated bar fight ever. It was all pandemonium. Sometimes you got to let that cage on the inside be pure pandemonium. I don't care about your hugs. I don't care about your handshakes. Pull a Floyd Mayweather. Let a guy come up and tell him he's going to apologize to you, and you punch him across the mouth. I liked how Floyd Mayweather took heat from that fight because, he sucker punched him. No, he didn't. The referee said fight. The guy went over to shake his hand. The rules are protect yourself at all times. Floyd Mayweather was, as much as I like to put the guy down, he was well within his rules. Keep the pandemonium inside the cage. Let people say what they want to say. If they're idiots, they're idiots. If they say something and it's potentially a wow factor, let them say it. The UFC is going to get behind, every promotion is going to get behind somebody who's trying their hardest to promote themselves. They're going to allow that machine to work for them. But if you're going to sit back and not work with the machine and work against it, the machine's not going to work for you. It never will. So, I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, you got to stop softening up the sport, keep the bravado there, and then, MMA will take its next step further.
You can follow him on Twitter at Talk MMA. His name is Dizz, and I believe your Twitter account will be unlocked starting Thursday, correct?
Tomorrow, actually, less than 24 hours.
Okay, well, we're filming this on Wednesday. We're recording this on Wednesday night, and this will probably drop by the time it's midnight. So
I'll make sure I give you a nice plug, my friend.
Buddy, I always appreciate the time, and you know what? We'll be talking.
Anything for you, brother.
And welcome to the epilogue of the first episode of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast so far. Thanks again to Dizz for coming on the podcast. I wanted to end and talk about Black Panther. And first of all, I went and saw it this past weekend. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I also knew going into it that it wasn't going to be like other superhero movies. And I was okay with that because I knew that whenever you're dealing with an aspect of a fictional universe that is atypical of the rest of the universe, it's going to be, if it's done well, it's going to be greeted with a lot of praise and a lot of acclaim. But for other people, it's going to be treated as, I don't know what this is. When Rogue One came out for Star Wars, and when the Wolverine movie came out with Hugh Jackman, the one where he's in Japan, or when on TV wise, after Buffy the Vampire Slayer was done, and then the TV show Angel came out. Every time you take something that is popular and create a alternate aspect of that universe, whether it's going back in time, whether it's branching out to a new set of characters, whether it's removing a popular character and putting him in a different location or a different world or a different experience, it's going to cause a lot of people to have different interpretations about it. The thing that we forget about Black Panther is that the character that we know as T'Challa, the Black Panther superhero character, before him, everybody was basically a Caucasian dude. But back in 1966, when he debuted and was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, he appeared in the Fantastic Four comic in 1966. It was the first time you had a main character who is not Caucasian. Now, whether Jack Kirby and Stan Lee intended to draw him as dark coloring as they did, I think that's a conversation not for today, because in many ways they were trying to portray him as an African man. And over the years, the view of Black Panther and how he's portrayed in comics evolved a little bit. It became less about his skin color and more about the suit. And it became less about the suit after a while and more about Wakanda and vibranium and all these different things. And I'm specifically talking about the comic right now. You look at the history of superheroes, it's very important to remember that it was in Marvel that T'Challa and Luke Cage, also known as Power Man, or Sam Wilson's The Falcon, all of these characters debuted in DC in the late 60s and early 70s. But they were blazed, their path was, started by Black Panther. And Marvel is not a racially driven property. If you don't believe that, you have to remember that technically Storm, who is a woman from Africa, is one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel universe. In Marvel Comics, this is not a racial conversation. So the fact that people are trying to make this about the fact that he's, the skin color, and they're trying to make a big deal about, when this movie came out and, race in America and race in the world, that's not the purpose of this movie. That's not the purpose of what Marvel is trying to do. That may be an unintended consequence that came out of this conversation. But when Black Panther was created in 1966, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby weren't creating him to say, hey, look, here's a black man. No. The idea well, he's from this country called Wakanda in Africa. So obviously he's going to look a certain way if he's from another country. So he'll look like the country that he's from. People overlook the fact that the comic that is ultra political, that it has all the political and the social innuendo and the cultural innuendo and the civil rights innuendo, it's X-Men. Magneto is a representation of Malcolm X, and Professor Charles Xavier is a representation of Dr. Martin Luther King. And the origins of the conflict in X-Men was always meant to be a fictional retelling of it in a world where mutants are the outcasts of humanity. And obviously it wasn't a direct parallel because over the years, Professor X and Magneto have done a lot of different things. But over time, X-Men always was the place where we had the uncomfortable conversations. The comic God Loves and Man Kills. Comics where they deal with things such as, dealing with, the government and, should we listen to the government, and all these different things. A lot of that stuff was dealt with in X-Men. It was never dealt with Black Panther. So this idea that the Black Panther movie is supposed to represent something, the people who say that either didn't watch the movie or they went into it with their own biases. I'm going to tell you what the movie was about. Spoiler alert. Good? All right, good. We're good. Put it out there. The main overarching message that spoke to me from Black Panther was this. If you're in a position to help people and you don't, then you're and it's going to come back to bite you. Because that's what happens in the movie. When they left after Eric Killmonger's father was killed and they left him in Oakland, what happened? It came back to bite them in the movie. What happens early in the movie? T'Challa's girlfriend turns to him and says, we have all this technology. We should be helping people. The fact that we don't, that's a bad thing. T'Challa tells his father, I don't want to be like you anymore. At one point, he says, I want to be better than you. And T'Challa tries to do everything right. And he still faces people who are against him, people who are apprehensive to listen to him and believe in him. And the fact at the end, what does he do? He goes to the United Nations and he says, we are going to share with the world what we have. And they're going to open that Department of Sciences in Oakland. In the Marvel Universe, they're going to have a Wakanda embassy in Oakland. They're going to do all these things. They're going to start sharing with the world their technology, their medical research. Remember, in the movie, that dude should never walk again, that CIA agent. But what did they do? Because of their technology, because of the vibranium, he can walk again. And to me, that was the overarching message. It was that if you're in a position to help people, you should help people. And if you don't, then shame on you. And that karma is going to come back and bite you. And it did in the movie. People who didn't have to die, died. People who didn't have to be hurt were hurt. Families were divided. Friends were divided. Allegiances were divided. All because one person didn't do the right thing. Now, of course, it ends happily ever after, and T'Challa unites all these people, and, we all move on. Everything's going to be good, and, you see at the end, everything's good, and they mix it with the girlfriend, but it's how they got there that's important. And to me, that was the beauty of the movie. The movie dug deep into something that I think a lot of people in the world are uncomfortable with. Just like the Dark Knight movie dug into a topic that makes people uncomfortable. And that is, Black Panther, I think, was addressing a world of selfish people. A world where people have resources and opportunities that nobody else does. And the fact that T'Challa saw that and turned around and said, we're going to start using our medical technology, our advancements that we've learned about vibranium. We're going to take everything that we have and we're going to share it with the world because we want to make the world a better place. And he learned that the mistakes of his father didn't have to be repeated by him. There's so many people in the world today who are selfish. They can't see beyond their own four walls of their house, their own little bubble they've created for themselves. We live in a microwave society that is all about me, I. And you see a guy in Black Panther. I don't give a darn about his skin color. I don't give a darn about his place in the world. He says, I can do the right thing. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to stop until I get it done. And you saw how a young man whose father was killed, who lost his family, grew up angry, and he never learned how to cope with that anger. And his solution, as he tells Black Panthers, I've been training my whole life to kill you. There's a lot of deep stuff in that movie. And I think that's what made it great. It was more than just a superhero movie. It was more than just a, let's put some big special effects on the screen and let's see how many explosions we can have. It was, here's a story and we're going to put it together. And I also appreciate the fact that they took all the history of Black Panther and Wakanda and made it condensed and digestible for an audience that, I'm sorry, has no time to read 50 years worth of comics. Actually, 40 years in Black Panther's situation. But the point is that nobody needed to know about how he became Black Panther again, how he went through all these trials, or about the time that he gave his sister the throne. They took everything about Black Panther and they condensed it and they made it interesting. And I think it's a great movie. And I think it's one of the best of the Marvel movies. I don't think it's the best. I think that Age of Ultron is still the best of all the Marvel movies right now. I think Doctor Strange has to be in the conversation. I think Winter Soldier, the second Captain America movie, has to be in the conversation. The original Iron Man movie is still a classic because they set the stage for everything. Whether you want to say either Thor Ragnarok or Thor the Dark World were great. They both were great movies. I think Guardians of the Galaxy did an exceptional job at creating and exposing the world to a part of the Marvel creation that no one had really ever seen or understood before very well. So there's a lot of the movies that did very well. And I think that what Black Panther does is it separates itself because it was more about the story than the superhero. And I think that was what was amazing about it. And it really touches people where they are because there's characters in the movie that everybody can identify with. And before I end this, Michael B. Jordan has to arguably be one of the greatest villains I've ever seen. Michael B. Jordan did such an amazing job at portraying a character that you're not supposed to empathize with. He portrayed a character you're not supposed to like or be interested in or root for, and he made you want to root for him until he ripped it away from you. He spends half the movie you wondering, who is this guy? What is his story? And then it becomes exposed and it comes out. And then you're going along and you're going along and you're going along and you realize, oh man, maybe this guy was treated wrong and he was wrong and everything. And then when he gets his shot, he shows you why he should never had the shot in the first place. He is playing that villain character was amazing. I think it's not on the same level as Heath Ledger playing the Joker, but I definitely think it has to be in the conversation among at least best Marvel villains of all time ever portrayed. James Spader's portraying of Ultron was amazing. I think it's probably him and Michael B. Jordan are the two of the best villains I've ever seen in a Marvel movie. And they were probably the two of the most impactful ones as well. It's a shame that Michael B. Jordan had to play a character gets killed, but at least he went on a high note. That's for sure. And a powerful one at that. So I definitely highly recommend Black Panther. And when you're done watching it, you'll understand how it fits into the Marvel Universe. I know some people say it doesn't really fit. It doesn't really make sense. It does. You have to watch the end scene credits. You have to absorb the Captain America Civil War movie. At the end of the day, Black Panther is the step before what everything's been building towards. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. The Iron Man movies, the Thor movies, the Captain America movies, the introduction of Doctor Strange, the introduction of Spider-Man into the MCU, the Avengers movies. Everything is building to the Infinity War movie that is coming out this year when Thanos comes to Earth and just lays waste. I think it's going to be an amazing story. And the fact that Marvel, they purposely put Black Panther as the movie before Infinity War, because what they're basically going to use Black Panther for is they're going to use his part of the world and explain why Thanos is coming to Earth. The real reason. It's not just because he wants to destroy Earth and he's mad that they beat his T'Chari army and Loki and all that stuff. It's not about that with Thanos. In the comics, Thanos is about power. And you're going to find out about how much power he wants to accumulate in the Infinity War movie. So I'm really excited about that. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to the first ever Mutant Blitz podcast. Obviously we'll be working out some of the kinks and some of the elements of this, but I believe that this could be a place you can come every week to get some unfiltered opinions about sports and about comics, the movies and the TV shows specifically, because there's a lot of YouTube channels and a lot of podcasts that deal with comic books, but not enough people can explain to you in the absolute geeky way that I can about how the comics and the movies connect to each other. So thanks for tuning in. Again, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll catch you next week.